The Rita Cosby Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network. Breaking news.
And tonight on the Rita Cosby Show, President Trump addressing the nation. But guess what? A lot of networks did not cover it. I think that's disgusting. Can you imagine if they had done that to Joe Biden or Barack Obama? Why are they suppressing information from the president of the United States because they don't agree with him? Even if you don't agree with whatever he's saying, he is the president of the United States and he deserves to be heard. And I found it outrageous, as someone who's been covering presidents for a long time, to suddenly say, oh, I'm not going to cover him. It reminds me of what happened. Remember, I think it was CNN, when the border was like being overrun and he started talking about the open border, and CNN dumps out, and others essentially did the same thing at different moments, saying, well, that's not exactly true. We're going to dump out because that's a lie. Meantime, the border was open. We saw 20 million people coming through. So that was clearly, in my opinion, a very, very bad call by those networks. And tonight it was another very, very, very bad call, and a very transparent call. Just to give you, before we get to the substance of the speech, and there's a lot of it, let's go a little bit of the play-by-plays of who covered it and who did not. The president announced that at 9:00, there would be an address to the nation. He spoke for less than half an hour. That's not a lot of your time. It's not a lot of, quote, commercial time and all that. He doesn't do that many of these addresses to the nation. It's a pretty easy thing. You cover it. Whenever it's the president of the United States, there's nobody more important. You better cover it. You're in America, right? You're not in North Korea, right? And there, you better cover it or else, right? Can you imagine if Kim Jong-un said, I have a speech, and the network said, we're not covering it? But because we're in America, it is the leader of our country. Again, forget Republican, forget Democrat. You should be covering the president of the United States. And I think it's really disgraceful now that we're seeing all this information of the Democrats that are leading clearly a lot of these networks that decided, no, they're not going to cover it just because they don't like Trump. They're not going to cover it. And what we saw tonight, ABC television network did not cover it. NBC television network did not cover it. Not only did they not cover it, they actually put out a statement ahead of time saying they're not going to cover it. They were very proud that they weren't covering it. They were like telegraphing that they weren't going to cover it. Then MS Now, the cable channel, covered it just for a little bit, and then they dipped away because they obviously didn't like what they were hearing. Fox News covered it. Fox News Channel covered it. New York One in New York covered it. And CNN did not cover it, by the way. So ABC didn't cover it. NBC didn't cover it. CNN did not cover it. And MS Now only covered it for just a little bit. CBS covered it. It looked like just for a little bit as well. Not all of it. It looks like they came in late. But how dare ABC and NBC especially to come out and say, we're not going to cover the president of the United States. We don't think he's worthy of being covered is the message. That is preposterous. Now let's get to the content, guys, and I can't wait to hear your thoughts on that. 1-800-848-9222, 1-800-848-9222. And you are listening to the Rita Cosby Show on a very busy news night. So the president came out and he says that he is declassifying, it should be right now on whitehouse.gov, information and documents which he says shows vulnerabilities in the U.S. elections, that there is new intel or intel that was buried and hidden, he says, by the deep state and others, and that wasn't even given to the president of the United States in briefings and elsewhere. And he says, we're declassifying it to show you what was told, what was not told to the president, what was not presented to Congress, what was intentionally suppressed, that there are individuals who came forward and said, some of them, that they did the suppression. So that's interesting. I'd be curious to talk to these people. I think the DOJ should be talking to them Did they suppress information that would have been insightful into somebody potentially hacking? We're talking about like getting voter roll access. That's essentially what President Trump is saying the Chinese did tonight. One of the biggest revelations, I thought, and when it was interesting, when he came forward, and again, this is the allegation at this point. We haven't seen it. We can't prove it. But I'm just telling you what the President of the United States just said in his televised address on the few networks that covered it. Well, China came forward, they said, with going into the voter rolls. They never admitted it. What they say is that there's intelligence on the U.S. side showing that that's what they're doing, that China was essentially meddling in the election by getting access to voter rolls, and not just any small amount. 220 million, apparently, Americans had their information breached by the Chinese. That's a lot of Americans. And the information was like name, voter information, party, address, phone number. I mean, it's a lot of information. So how did that happen? I don't think I heard that I heard some allegations that China might be, remember, trying to have an influence. Remember back then during the election, there were reports about that. But to hear that maybe they went in and somehow got information of voters, that is troubling. How were they able to, quote, get into that sort of voting information? Of course, the next question is, did they do anything about it? Was there any information whatsoever tied to this that shows that they took advantage of it and actually did something with it? I'd be curious about that. Or did they just get the information and didn't necessarily do anything beyond that? But here's President Trump talking about what he says this new intel shows about China. Take a listen.
China and other countries have been trying to meddle in our elections. Evidence of fraud has been buried. Hundreds of thousands of non-citizens and dead people are listed and active on the voter rolls. And yet we still have elections with no voter ID, no proof of citizenship, and tens of millions of ballots floating aimlessly through the mail.
And here is a little bit more of what he says was China's role. Take a listen.
The cover-up of this colossal security breach is even more disturbing in light of the additional information showing that China engaged in other election-related activities to undermine my first administration and our 2020 campaign. They did not want, and they just didn't want it. They fought like hell not to have it, Donald Trump, to win, and for good reason. As the documents we are releasing show, CIA reporting explicitly stated, and I quote, in mid-2018, the Chinese Communist Party's policy was to leverage all domestic and foreign elements that were opposed to the U.S. president in an effort to reduce the U.S. president's votes and make him resign or prevent his reelection.
I mean, if they actually did go through some of these steps to have an influence, that's a pretty big deal. And here's a little bit more, because you heard him talk initially about the voter rolls. And he says, as they went through so far, and this is just a small amount, he says, because a lot of the states won't hand over their voter rolls. Mostly Democratic run states don't want to hand over their voter rolls. I wonder why. But he says already they found a huge number of people that never should have been listed to vote, hundreds of thousands.
Finally, to reveal just how vulnerable our elections continue to be, we are releasing the results of a stunning investigation by the Department of Homeland Security. According to the DHS review of state voter rolls and public records, they identified approximately 278,000 non-citizens who are registered to vote in federal elections. Since Democrat states refuse to share their voter files, the real number is actually much higher than that. Yet, even this limited analysis found more than 250,000 foreigners illegally registered to vote.
So close to 300,000 foreigners registered to vote. And he says that's just the tip of the iceberg. That's probably is just the tip of the iceberg. It's funny. We've had on Katz and Cosby, we have talked to people like Tom Fenton of Judicial Watch. And he claimed that there's many, many hundreds of thousands in just some states when they have done their own searches of voter rolls. So we'll see where this goes. It sounds like it's just the tip of the iceberg, but it's interesting. And it's interesting to see what did China do with this information. China, I'm sure, will deny it. Even if it's true, they'll deny it. But could they get into our voter rolls? And does that open just a lot of questions? I think most importantly, we all should make sure that our elections are free and fair. Nobody should have a problem with that. Everybody should have faith in the election process. And then President Trump started his speech tonight, you guys, touting the success also of America. And it was interesting because he talked about the border. He talked about the economy. He said essentially America is on fire, that it's doing great. And he touted a whole bunch of success. That's the way he started out the speech. Take a listen.
Good evening. Before we begin, I'm proud to report that our country is safer, stronger, and far wealthier than it has ever been before. We are doing great. Less than 2 years ago, we inherited an economic and social disaster. After the worst inflation in 48 years, the wide open borders with millions and millions of people pouring in from all over the world, including criminals of all types, and 11,888 murders, many of whom killed more than one person. We had transgender for everybody, men and women's sports, crime ravaging our cities, and the whole world was laughing at us as a nation, but not anymore. 2 years ago, our country was dead. Now we are the hottest country anywhere in the world.
We are the hottest country anywhere in the world, and touting a lot of big successes. And then he said, because of all this, we got to make sure we feel good about the election process. At the end, he talked about free and fair elections. He also talked about the SAVE Act. That is the Voter ID Act. And he said, why would you not want to have voter ID? I 100% agree with him on that. Why would you not want to have voter ID? Why would anybody oppose saying they want to have pictures? Why would anybody say, no, that's overreach? They even call it, the Democrats, the Voter Suppression Act. Why is it suppression to have voter ID so people feel good when you go to the polls, that it's the right person voting? Why would you not want to just double check, triple check? You want to open it up to fraud or somebody, just even for people to feel that way? Why would you? If you don't give assurances, how can they feel safe? And yet the Democrats keep calling it, as I said, the Voter Suppression Act. They say it's racist. They say it's totally improper and that it's unfair to ask for ID. So what? You're supposed to say, everybody just come on in and vote. I don't understand why the Democrats have a problem with the Voter ID Act, the Save America Act. And take a listen. Here is Senator Chuck Schumer. Of course, he is the Senate Minority Leader. And even before the speech happened, he could not wait to bash it. Take a listen.
With respect to the president's speech, CBS News is reporting that this may include some previously unreported claims about Chinese meddling in U.S. elections. Is that something you've ever been briefed on, or do you believe that might have any merit?
No one has any faith that Trump is going to tell the truth. He's lied for 6 years. He's particularly lied about the elections in 2020. No one is going to have any faith in what he says and does. And as long as he keeps appointing sycophants to the agencies in charge of the intelligence, no one has any faith or trust in what he's going to say.
Is there anything the president...
No one has any trust in what he has to say. No matter what he's going to talk about, no matter what it is, we don't believe him. You shouldn't carry it. And in fact, AOC was the orchestrator. AOC, who I believe is going to be running for president in 2028. She's the one who said, networks, you shouldn't be carrying this. I guess she's the new boss of ABC television network. and the new boss of NBC television network, because they listen to her, and maybe partly the boss of some of these others who dumped out early, dumped out after a minute or two. Can you imagine if Obama started talking and then other networks dumped out? You would never hear the end of it. They'd call you racist. I mean, this is so disgusting. That to me is shameful, whether you like it or agree with it or whatever. And I say this as somebody who's covered the White House. I've been in the White House many times, you guys, covering many presidents. I always give the respect to the president. You always want to hear what he has to say, even if you don't agree with him. How dare a network say, no, we don't like him, whether they say it overtly or not. But if you don't air him, that's essentially saying he is suppressed. We don't care what he says. We don't care what he's doing. We don't care whatever he says. And then you have the Democrats undermining him. This is really disgusting. This is like the Soviet Union. 1-800-848-9222. And we'll take your calls when we come back here on The Rita Cosby Show, where you will never be suppressed.
The Rita Cosby Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network. It's The Rita Cosby Show.
And let's go to your calls, guys. Let's go to Alice in Ohio. Line 1. Go ahead, Alice. What do you think?
The House Un-American Activities Committee. In 2016, Newt Gingrich wanted it brought back, and he was kind of poo-pooed. We need to bring that back. Was it someone in this country who helped China get these voting records? They have the power of subpoena. They need to name names, and they need to subpoena these people to appear in front of them. Also, it would go in the congressional record.
You know, that's an interesting question, because you're right. If the documents, and again, this all just happened a little bit ago, if the documents show that China got in, and if that happened, yeah, how did they get in? Did they know of a breach? Was there somebody working with them? And then also the other thing I thought was interesting was where he claimed that there were individuals who suppressed the information from him, from others, and Congress. Who were they? And we need to know why.
The Rita Cosby Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network. Rita Cosby is on. The Rita Cosby Show presents Back the Blue.
And this Back the Blue segment coming from Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, where police got a call about a car wreck. But when the officers got on the scene, they found a car upside down in the water with the driver still inside. Officers initially didn't realize that somebody was indeed inside the vehicle until they entered the water. But when they got there on the scene, they discovered that one of the windows was open. So the team worked to keep the driver talking while they came up with a plan to get him out of the car. They immediately called in the fire department to implement what we call the jaws of life, a hydraulic tool that firefighters use to free people trapped in vehicles. Luckily, they were able to get the driver out just in the nick of time before the whole vehicle filled up with water. What a scary situation. Once the driver was safely rescued, he was checked out by first responders, who then immediately transported him to a nearby hospital. And he's, needless to say, thankful to be alive, thanks to our great men and women in blue. And, of course, the firefighters who brought the jaws of life. Well, we're talking about President Trump, who just did a big speech to the country. But you wouldn't have known that if you were listening on ABC television or NBC television. Listen to this Fox News report, because it came out even before the address. They put out a big statement saying, guess what? We're not going to cover the President of the United States. Listen to what Fox News said.
Well, the president says he's going to make news with new intelligence documents about the 2020 election. He says in this speech that he's going to talk about election integrity, but that's not all. He's also going to talk about Iran, and he's going to talk about the way forward with the U.S. economy. Reuters has that ABC and NBC will not air the president's election security speech on broadcast networks. Apparently, they will stream it. However, he is talking about Iran, and there's new information.
I mean, you cancel the president of the United States. Oh, we don't feel like talking to him. No way. No way. We don't need it. And here is CNN. Here's John King there. Listen to what they said.
The other is, which election will the president most be focused on? The ones yet to come or the one he lost? We're going to be watching and listening to what he says tonight, and we will bring you any breaking news ASAP. But we are not going to take the president's speech live. That's because of this president's history of misleading and, in some cases, false statements on the subject of elections and election integrity. Also because the White House earlier today said he'll be showing newly declassified documents, and we want to make sure we have time to review them, to contextualize whatever he says or shows before airing it. One thing is clear. Ever since announcing this speech on Monday, he's been making big promises about tonight's speech. And today at the White House, so did his press secretary.
So I guess they just won't cover the White House, right? Because they don't believe in them. I mean, this is really remarkable. And that to me is so disheartening and sad and horrible. Here is Steve Bannon, who gave his 2 cents about what he thinks about ABC television and NBC television, the two networks, those two saying, nope, we're not going to cover it. And this is what Bannon says should happen.
Wait for it. NBC and ABC have already told the president of the United States, the White House, they're not going to cover it. I put up on Getter, fine, don't cover it. Pull their license. They're supposed to get those licenses. The key to the license is to do public good by covering major news events and major events that are for the good of the nation. If they're not going to do that, just pull the license. Pull it. Let's see what tough guys they are when you do that. Let's see how, Vaughn Hilliard and all these guys at MSNBC, the network that was so crappy, they had to spin it off because it was hurting their brand, right? If NBC don't want to cover it, fine, just pull the license. ABC don't want to cover it, fine. You're adults, you made a decision, just pull the license. See how that sits with you. We're going to
There's some good music in the background there, too, as Steve Bannon's talking. That was kind of fun music there. But AOC, I think she's the new president of ABC television and NBC television and these others that dumped out early, too, and didn't cover it. I mean, this is crazy because even as soon as she heard the president was going to do a speech a couple days ago, right away she said, don't carry it. Like AOC now thinks she can dictate what the networks cover and what they don't. And sadly, they listened to her. How sad is that? Listen to what she said.
Congressman, Donald Trump is scheduled to give a big rant to spew election conspiracy theories on Thursday. Do you think that TV networks should run it? Do they have an ethical obligation?
A big ad?
Rant, of the speech. He's basically doing made-for-TV broadcasts about election fraud and conspiracy theories and all the rest on Thursday.
I don't think that we should be contributing to any platforming of lies about our election, and so I think that many news outlets oftentimes may receive transcripts, and I think that we have an ethical obligation to not air things that undermine our election, that are not rooted in evidence and fact. And so, of course, it depends on the contents of his speech, but that's my take on it.
What do you make of DHS?
Isn't she friends with Ilhan Omar, who came out and said somebody did something around 9/11, like no big deal? And isn't that Ilhan Omar who filed the taxes? Remember that originally the value of assets was like tens of millions of dollars, and then suddenly it came out that it was like minus. Remember? Oh, the accountant made a little mistake. But she's worried what President Trump, the president of the United States, is going to say. That's incredible. And just in the last few minutes, response to the president's address, Jim Himes, Connecticut representative who always bashes Trump, said Trump lied to the American people in his speech. That's his reaction. And then John Ossoff, Georgia senator, said that Trump is depraved and immoral. That's his reaction. Trump is depraved and amoral. From John Ossoff. That's what he took away from the speech. Not worried to say, hey, maybe we should look into these things. Let's take a look and see what these declassified documents are. No, Trump's immoral. We don't need to listen to him. What a sad moment that is. That is really, really sad. Let's go to Tony in Clifton, line 4. Tony, your thoughts tonight.
Well, speaking of amoral, not airing information that the general public has a right to know, because 220 million of us had our information hacked, and no one was able to bring it to President Trump at his briefing. Somebody suppressed it, and we, the American people, more than half of us in this country, Rita Cosby, would like to know who suppressed it. So that's my first question.
That's a good one, right? Who and what information? Like we heard a little tonight, Tony. You know, we heard it was like names, phone numbers, this. So what information was out there, and did they use it? Did they use it for something? That I thought was pretty stunning. Like that, you're right. What about John Ossoff could care less about the 220 million people that had their information in America accessed by the Chinese, according to what President Trump was saying. And so as opposed to saying, boy, that's interesting, we should all care about election integrity, he just goes right for Trump.
In a Marxist environment, in a country that's now becoming almost half Marxist in our leadership, they don't care about the American people. What they do care about is making sure, under any circumstances, that the votes for who should be winning are not happening. And first they did all their legal games. We've talked about them on WABC. They wrote books about them. But this hacking by China of our information. And, you know, Rita, we got so many messages during the election, if you remember, that you don't know who they were coming from, and they wanted to take a poll. And they would say who they were from and who are you voting for and ask you questions. I deleted, like, everything because all our systems are getting hacked. So what's so surprising about that happening? What's surprising is that nobody told the president it was happening. And the last thing I'll say, Rita, is these stations that did not air what our president had to say absolutely should be fined. But bigger than that, the American people should know that you are being, you know, your information is out there. Somebody has it about who you are, and no one did anything about it. And that was, I think it was Greg Kelly or one of them tonight said, that was it was Barr, that Justice Department, who didn't get it over to the president. So in the briefings, this is all going to be investigated. So
and I think Tony, you had a good point that like we need to know why. Like in other words, okay, if they didn't put it over, what's the reason why? Who and why were they in these quote? The one thing he brought up, the burn bags, that I thought was interesting too. He said those piles of burn bags that were sitting there. It's like, you know, the allegation is there were some really incriminating documents there that they never wanted to see the light of day. We found them. We Trump team found them there. They were, I think he said Obama burn bags. It sounded like, right? And these documents are explosive. So what was in the burn bags and why would you be burning that information? And he said he had a couple names. What I found interesting was he said, yeah, there were a couple people who said that they were told or that they specifically made sure that this information didn't get passed on. So like they were very like proud of it almost. So pull those people in for questioning. Find out what they know, what was their intent, how many others do they know that were like them, and why did they do that? I mean, you know, if you maybe don't like information, you still got to hand it over to Congress and the President of the United States, right?
Remember, they didn't want us to do anything during COVID and take certain medications, and we had to wear masks. This is a very scary government. And finally, just to conclude, Rita, any station, if I repeat this like a million times, it's not enough. Any station who suppressed this from the American people really represents like the banana republic that this country is turning into. And we should not let that happen. Thank God for President Trump.
Yeah, it is. You know what? It is shocking that they are like banning certain speakers that they just don't like. That they are banning, blocking phrases like, and I brought up the example. Can you imagine if Barack Obama said, "Oh, I have a speech about whatever," it would be wall to wall on those networks. And by the way, it should be wall to wall. Like whenever you have the president of the United States saying, "I'm going to do a televised national address," that's a big deal, no matter who the president is. And the fact that they would decide to vet it and decide to block it out, and then the others, a few of them, I brought up dumped out. Like I looked up and I saw, because we have monitors all over the place, and I'm looking and I'm going, okay, MSNBC looks like it's covering it, and then they dumped out, because they obviously didn't like what he was saying. But you know what's so interesting about Trump, Tony, is that he called them out in the speech. He called out ABC and NBC in his speech. Like he wants the America, like the ones who are listening, to say, hey, you have a right to hear. And he literally called the others out publicly and said, how dare you? And that he may have the FCC look at their licenses. It's an interesting proposition. What are your thoughts on that?
They should be looked at, Rita, because I want to tell you something. These are high crimes and misdemeanors, and this is one level below shooting somebody and killing them.
How is it one level? Now you confuse me a little, Tony. How's this one level below shooting someone?
Because this is like, what I'm saying, that Rita, that they're taking grave steps to get rid of people, either by killing them or by voting.
No, it's or by hiding information, or was someone working in cahoots? I mean, these allegations. I'd still put the killing someone quite a bit higher, but I know, but Tony, I take your point. Because it is a big threat, and it's certainly worth pursuing. And my feeling is, if you have nothing to hide, let it get out there, right? Investigate it, check it out. If you have nothing to hide, then they shouldn't be worried about it. But for some reason, they are going through such extraordinary measures. It just shows how, I think, they fear Trump so much. They truly have Trump derangement syndrome, but a lot of it is because they fear Trump. They fear that the fearlessness and the courage of President Trump, because President Trump is saying, here's what happened. Let's take a look at it. And why would you not say, hey, that's a good idea? But they're not doing that. So that's why it just shows how scared they still are of President Trump and his sort of courageousness to kind of take no prisoners and expose. And look, after all the stuff we've seen, Tony, of late, with the Arctic frost investigation, with Jack Smith, who ended up getting the text messages of 44 members of Congress, and what we saw happen with Mar-a-Lago and all these other things, some of these allegations don't sound so crazy, in my opinion, now, right?
We lost Charlie Kirk. Even today in Britain, they killed a woman who spoke out against, that woman in Britain. Yes. She was a leader, and she spoke out against, she was a conservative, and they killed her in her own home. I forgot her name. It was in the news today.
No, I know exactly who you're talking about. She was a conservative there in England, and that definitely does need to be looked into. Tony, thank you. Go ahead, Tony. Go ahead.
They beat her to death because they didn't want to hear her views anymore, Rita.
Yeah, it's a horrible case. And Tony, I'm so glad that you brought that up, because that case definitely does need to be looked into. Do you know, by the way, before I let you go, Tony, do you know anything about the perpetrators in that case? Because I saw when the news broke, but I did not see do we know who's responsible for it or not?
I never heard of them mentioning anybody. I just heard this today, that they beat her to death in her house.
Yeah, I had heard that she had been beaten, that there was something which is so horrific. And she was a conservative, and apparently, well known it's really, really frightening. I think she's former politician, TV personality, I believe. And they do say that they believe it was a targeted attack. It happened, I think, last week, but I haven't seen who was responsible yet. We need to make sure that we get to the bottom of it because it's so, so horrible. And you're right. She was found dead, I think, in her home. I'm looking here in Devon, England. So thank you for reminding everybody about that. It is so important. Tony, thank you very, very much. And everybody, we're going to continue your calls after the break here on The Rita Cosby Show, 1-800-848-9222.
The Rita Cosby Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network. This is the Rita Cosby Show.
And you guys know I always love reading your tweets on @Rita Cosby. Be sure to follow me and feel free to send in messages there as well. And Hermit Sal, who always has some good ones, said, Rita, AOC told stations not to broadcast President Trump's address to the nation. What next? Telling us what programs to watch and what books and newspapers to read. That's a good one, Sal. And also, from Ain't Your Daddy. I love this. I love that one. They say, you know what, Rita? I don't believe that AOC on her own decided to tell the press not to cover the Trump speech. I think the press heads told AOC what to say. Why? To make her appear more powerful, to raise her stock, to make her a candidate for president in 2028. That is a very interesting point too, as well. Was this all sort of part of an orchestrated effort to make her look important and to have a say? Clearly, sadly, they're listening to her. 1-800-848-9222. Let's go to Mike on the Lower East Side on line 1. Go ahead, Mike.
How you doing, Rita? Yeah, this is what communists do. The first thing they do is cut your airwaves. It could be George Soros. It could be China. But I think we need to read the contract the FCC has given them, and if they did something illegal, and I think they did because they prevented the president's speech from people that wanted to hear his speech, okay, and they prevented them from hearing it because it was an important speech and it was an urgent speech, and what they did was a communist move. And they should be, their licenses should be revoked or suspended, and until we find out who was the originator of this plan.
Yeah.
I don't think it was AOC. Who
do you think it was, Mike?
It could be George Soros. Could have been China. It could have been out of the country. It could be communists in this country, but it's a communist. It's a communist move. This is what communists do.
Yeah, that's a good point. You know, that to me, you're right. It feels so anti-American, anti-free speech. We're going to continue more after the break.
Thanks for listening to The Rita Cosby Show. You can hear The Rita Cosby Show weeknights at 10 on 77 WABC. If you like the podcast, share it with your friends and listen anytime at WABCRadio.com and download the WABC Radio app. Hit that subscribe button on all major podcast platforms. Plus, follow WABC on social on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and X. See you next time for a new episode so you never have to wonder.
What the heck is going on here?